Hi, welcome to today's video. Today we're taking a trip on the canals in Amsterdam. Fantastic little trip, so let's go and have a look around. On this trip we're going to visit some dancing houses. We're going to see some unique buildings. And we're going to see some of these eloquent and unique houses. And a few that certainly a bit more modern. And lots of canal boats. Amsterdam is a fantastic place, and it's built basically around three major canals. Let's go have a look on them. Amsterdam was originally called Amstel River. In the 12th century it was a marshland with the river Amstel running straight through the middle of it, and then they dammed it so that they could actually use some of the land. So it was Amstel Dam. And then over the years that became Amsterdam, the city that we now know in the Netherlands. Well, we're going to go for a trip down these canals. I'm going to explain a little bit about some of the sites as we travel along. But the idea of this video is to be more of a relaxing but informative video than perhaps some of the others. The original houses in Amsterdam were built as light as possible. None were very tall, and they often, as you'll see as you're going round, are full of windows, more than the average house. The reason was, windows are lighter than brick, but they kept the buildings stable. You've got to remember that these were built on a bed of wooden posts, These posts were deep. They were up to 15 metres, which is about 45 feet deep into the soil, but they were still wooden posts. If these posts became exposed to air, they began to rot, and the buildings they supported sank or shifted. Today the water levels are very carefully monitored, and this helps minimise the amount of rot that does occur. When new posts are needed, they're now made out of concrete. But as most houses still have some or all timber posts, you'll see many houses with a little bit of a tilt. The tower that you can see there is called Montelbaanstoren, which I've probably pronounced totally wrong. But let me give you an idea of what this place was about. This tower, ignoring the part on the top of it, was a medieval way of defending the shipyards, the warehouses from attacks. Because at the side of it was marshland, and then there was the businesses building up. So they built this tower. It was full of soldiers with longbows, crossbows, and the very early firearms. About a century later, they decided to add a spire and a clock to it. It was designed by somebody called Hendrik de Keyser. The architect actually built quite a few buildings around Amsterdam. But there was a problem with this tower. The clocks couldn't keep time. The bells would ring out randomly, so locals gave it a nickname. They called it Silly Jack. Not long after the clock and spire was added, the tower started to lean to one side, and with a lot of effort it was put back into place. Many buildings lean in Amsterdam because the soil that it's actually built on is extremely soft, and the buildings Right, I know I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Oudtsjans. Basically, the outer trench canal. During the 16th century, this canal was designed to be a defensive canal. All the canals were either for defence, transportation, or to control the water levels, but this canal was slightly different. This canal did all three, as it was the only canal wide enough for large ships to sail in, and because of how close it was to the harbour. It was a convenient place to unload cargo. I hope you're enjoying this video. If you are, why not hit the subscribe button? Then you can see more travel inspiration, reviews, some hidden gems, and you can plan your next getaway. Let's see what else there is in the canals. Now we're coming up to a place called Vlooienburg, which basically was a place that was built specifically for the Jews to live on. It was actually nicknamed Flooding Island, which I'm sure you can work out why it was called that. This was built for the Jews in the 17th century because at that time, throughout the whole of Europe, the Jews were looked down on as a lower level of people. They were the people that you went to borrow money from, but you didn't want to actually be with. So they built this island for the Jews to exist on that flooded on a regular basis. But over time, the name of the island changed to this Vlooienburg. And then it became known as Flea Island. I'm sure you can guess possibly why, with an island that flooded on such a regular basis, why they would call it Flea Island. Because of the flies and the fleas that were there. But Flea Island, over the centuries, has now become a place where they have markets. Flea markets. In fact, this is where the term flea market comes from. And in actual fact, although they don't have them that regularly, when they do have them, they are the largest flea markets in the whole of the Netherlands. And some say the whole of the world, although I can't comment on that. Well worth, if you go to Amsterdam, taking that little bit of time to visit it and see just what that flea market's really about. Now we've come to the dancing houses, which is a row of houses which are specifically well known throughout the world because of the lean on them. If you look at them, not one of them is straight up. Because they've got little gaps between them, you can see the leans, where a lot of the houses tend to be built so tight that there's no gaps between them. These you can see that they are actually tilting to one side or the other. And that's why they get the nickname the dancing houses, because it looks as though they've danced and fallen over a little bit, I suppose. But it's going back to the wooden posts in the ground. They've rotted and been repaired, but they're at the point now where replacing the wood and straightening up the house would cause more damage than just leaving them at these slight angles. So if you do go on this canal cruise, definitely something that you want to see. And it's only really that you can see it from the canal. We're now actually on the Amstel River itself, the river that's been flowing for centuries and was dammed off to create Amsterdam. Obviously the river still exists, but it was areas that were actually dammed off, created from Amstel Dam to Amsterdam. You can see here this big building, this big white building. That's actually the National Opera and Ballet House for the Netherlands. But it's a bit of a controversial place because Amsterdam has got this particular design of house which is unique anywhere in the world. They, when we were building this, had a lot of protesters against this building because it just looks out of place compared to the rest of Amsterdam. I mean, the building itself's fine, but it doesn't match the rest of Amsterdam, so they did have quite a bit of a fight to get this place built.
As you can see, it's not blue, it's grey. In the early days it was a small wooden bridge and it was painted blue. Late 18th century.
We're coming up to what's called the Blue Bridge, which is grey, which makes a lot of sense. But if you actually go back in history, it was originally a wooden bridge that was painted blue. But like wood anywhere, it rots. So in the 18th century it was rebuilt, and they copied a bridge from Paris and painted it grey, but everybody calls it the Blue Bridge. You may have noticed as we're travelling along, and if you go into Amsterdam itself, you'll see this logo everywhere. 3 X's. Now, this originated from on board ships that used to go to the harbour of Amsterdam, and it's been sort of adopted as the logo for Amsterdam itself now. What the 3 crosses are supposed to stand for is merciful, determination, and heroic. Although some younger people may know it better as sex, drugs and rock and roll, or according to the person who drove this canal boat for us, that's what he thinks anyway.
In the early 17th century, a time of tremendous physical and economic growth
Right, now we've come to a canal called Herengach, and I've probably pronounced that wrong, and I apologise if I have. The English name for it would be the Gentleman's Canal. Let me just explain a bit of how this canal system was designed. Back in the 17th century, the 1600s, during a time of massive, and I mean massive, economic wealth for Amsterdam, they laid down 3 major canals. And they did these in concentric circles, if you like, or half circles. The innermost, which is what we're on now, the Gentleman's Canal. Then you have the middle canal, the Kaiserach, which basically means the Emperor's Canal. Then you've got the Prinsenach, the Prince's Canal. Now, the Gentleman's Canal, the innermost, was the wealthiest. You tended to get your shipbuilders lived there, politicians, your merchants, people who were the key people driving business within Amsterdam. And of course, they have the best mansions. The middle canal, the Emperor Canal, was for the middle class people. People who were middle management of businesses. They would have quality houses, but maybe not quite at the same level. And then you got the Prince's, the outer canal. This one was really aimed towards the harbour businesses, the industrial side of Amsterdam. Now, this canal had lower sides, so that ships could unload their goods, but that obviously meant as well that it tended to flood more often. The further to the centre you actually lived, the higher class you were. To be honest, today all of the canal areas are very expensive. In the area of the gentlemen's canals, these now sell from 15 million euros. In fact, most of them are now business-owned buildings. There's not that many people who can afford to live in them. However, there is one person you might recognise the name of, Mick Jagger. He owns number 566. So if you happen to pass by and you want to knock on the door for a cuppa, you know where he lives. There is a hotel just round the corner though if you want to stay local to him. That's at £6,000 a night. So perhaps we'll have to save up our pennies for that particular one. just coming up to a spot on the canal which is pretty unique. It's called the Seven Bridges, and it's the only place you can actually see 7 bridges in a row. As you can see, it's a little bit difficult to see them, and you've got to be at the right place at the right time. And because it's a busy canal, our canal boat couldn't stay for long, so took what we could. I wonder if you can see them. During the 17th century, on this inner canal, the people who were living here was earning as much as €700,000, about £750,000 a month. That's more than the average rich person earns today. Most of the houses on the inner circle, the inner canal, are now for businesses, as I say, because they are just too expensive. However, there are some exceptions. I've mentioned Mick Jagger, but number 502, which is this black one with the white trim on it, is where the mayors live. The traders from Amsterdam over the years created companies, and some of them you'll even hear or semi-recognise the names of them now. There was the Dutch East India Company and the Dutch West India Company. They brought into the city precious stones, spices, textiles, porcelains. Now the only problem is that back then in the 17th century you'd have finely dressed people from all over the world working in Amsterdam. But there was one little problem. All the sewage was going straight into the canals, and this was one of the smelliest places in Europe at the time. Obviously it doesn't smell like that now, but at that time, at its wealthiest point, it was also when Amsterdam smelt the most. We're now reaching the Golden Bend, and that is where the most expensive houses of all in Amsterdam are. To give you some sort of idea what these houses are like, on the first floor, floors are marble. They have huge mirrors to give the impression that the rooms are wider. They have false doors to give you the idea that there's another room behind them. But to have marble flooring, these are really the most expensive houses you will probably ever see. When you look at the houses, you'll notice two things. First of all, right at the top, most of the houses, you'll see something sticking out. That is a hoist to bring stuff up to the top of the house. Now, that would have been for the business that was there to begin with, but the interesting fact is that the newest houses in Amsterdam also have that fitted, and the reason is it's the easiest way to get items up to the top. Because of the fact that these houses are fairly thin, they still put them on today, so that if you want a wardrobe and you're top there, you're not having to pull it up loads of stairs, just hoist it up. The second thing you'll notice is that some of them have little emblems on the top. We noticed this when rounding round the villages and towns in the Netherlands, but this is more obvious in Amsterdam. And those little emblems were about who was working in that, or who was living in that house, what industry they were from. So for example, if it was a butcher, you might see a pig on the top of it. If you were working with horses, you might see a horse's head. And we've actually seen those driving around the towns in the Netherlands. They have them everywhere. But in Amsterdam, just about every one that was built had that on the top. You'll notice it as we go along. Because of the nature of Amsterdam, the fact that it's on poles, buildings were restricted. They had a limit on how wide they could be, no more than 6 metres wide or 18 foot. As you travel along, you'll notice that all the buildings, apart from the very, very new ones, are all about the same width. And there's a reason for that. Space was limited. However, if you was wealthy, there was a way around it. You'd buy 2 or 3 adjacent plots. The buildings on them would have different fronts. But when you went through the door that was an actual door that worked, you'd be going into a building that was 3 wide. Not only that, if you did just go for the 1 front or 2 fronts, the distance from the front of the house to the back of the house could be immense. There was no restriction on how long the house could be. So you would often get 1 width houses with 40 rooms in, a garden, and then at the back of that a coach house for your horses. To begin with, all the houses in Amsterdam were built with wood, but after 2 major fires, by the end of the 16th century, the 1500s, it was put into practice that all outsides of buildings must be brick. That wasn't to say that the inside of the building, or the actual frame of the building, wasn't wood, because what would happen is they would build a wooden house and put a very thin brick facade upon it. This was all well and good until the 18th century, when the biggest fire of all happened, because all these houses were still realistically wood. Even now, even though concrete is used for a lot of the poles, the newer poles that are fitted, most of the houses still have a wooden skeleton behind these bricks. So even today, many of the houses, if they were to catch fire, go up extremely quickly. Of the whole older houses anyway. There are actually 1,500 bridges throughout the canal network in Amsterdam. And as you might have noticed as we're travelling along, we've been through quite a few, and they are all unique. Each bridge seems to have its own specific design and specific character. canal boats that you can see moored against the sides, they are now more like your normal house. Some of them have got gardens on them, some of them have basically not moved in years. To begin with, they were literally for transporting goods up and down the canals, but now they're connected to the mains. They've got electricity, they've got gas, they've got water, and they sell for in excess of £350,000 each. And that's for a boat just docked at the side. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little trip. There's a video coming up which I think you'll also enjoy. Look forward to seeing you on that one. Bye for now.